Welcome to the ENFASYS podcast. In this episode, we explore the role of markets and business models in driving sustainability and how better organization, cooperation, and value sharing can empower farmers. Joining us are two guests who bring both policy and real-world farming perspectives to the discussion. First, Joanna Kaliva from Gaia, where she leads the EU-funded projects department. Joanna works across multiple agricultural sectors and specializes in rural development, digital agriculture, and sustainable business strategies. In ENFASYS, she coordinates the work on business models and social innovation, helping us understand how value chains, cooperatives, infrastructures, and market structures can create the right incentives for farmers to adopt sustainable practices. We are also joined by Anna van der Mosdijk, project manager at Seja Young Farmers. Anna brings the perspective of the next generation of farmers, drawing on her upbringing on a dairy farm in Normandy and her background in EU public policy. She works closely with young farmers across Europe, particularly on the issue of income security, market access, and fair value distribution. All key themes in today's discussion. Welcome.
Hello, Davide.
Thank you, Davide. Hello.
Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. Let's try to understand why are business models important in a project like ENFASYS, and why can they impact the uptake of sustainable practices?
Within this project, we studied some business models in case studies level, and we consider that business models matter because farmers actually do not operate by their own or in isolation. They actually operate within the markets. So even if policies encourages farmers to move towards sustainability, they will be more willing to adopt to these practices only when the market structure around them make it valuable. So in that sense, strong business models can make actually this happen. We have cooperatives, agricultural cooperatives, some producer organizations, and other kind of farmer alliances that supports and help farmers to secure prices, risks, and maybe also stabilize their income. So farmers working together have more bargain power to access resources that otherwise could be very difficult for them or complex to access and secure. On the other hand, also, business models are very, very important because they actually frame and shape the relationships among the value chain actors, meaning that they connect farmers with consumers and markets. And for example, some short supply chains or sustainability, branding and other traceability tools build trust with farmers and consumers and allow them to make to capture more value. So to make it shortly, policies, we could say that set directions to sustainability while business models support and make it economical possible.
Okay, thank you for this very straightforward explanation and simplified explanation as well. It was very clear. So we understood why business models are important in a project like ENFASYS, and I would like to hear a bit more about what you have done regarding business models in ENFASYS. As in other episodes, I always need to remind that this episode is being recorded 10 months before the end of the project, and some of the areas of work are still ongoing. And one of these areas is indeed the work on business models and the work on this, what we call work package. So please let us know what you have done so far and what results you already have, but also what you will be doing in the future and maybe what will be the results at the end of the project or the wished results.
Thank you for this question. Actually, you are absolutely right. This work is in progress, but up to now we have been implementing first steps. So we have been working and developed an approach to understand how these real business models can support farmers in moving towards more sustainable farming systems, but also to stay in these systems. So we worked very closely with 10 case studies across EU and that already been selected in the project. And each of these case studies organized workshops with local actors like farmers, cooperatives, processors, and everyone in the value chain. And this work was in order to help us to identify what business strategies and what new business strategies are actually implemented in practice and could better support these farmers to take the transition to sustainability. So following this first approach, we of course collected all the results and we developed the methodology for a comparative analysis to compare all these different strategies and models that derive from this activity. And this actually allowed us to map these different strategies, the barriers that farmers face, and some enabling conditions that are necessary for sustainable business models to work. And of course, we had the opportunity to see also some common patterns. But now we're currently designing the next phase of this work, which include a new methodology to further explore the most promising business model types that derived and to understand how they could be implemented in practice and also in other sectors or areas.
Okay. Yeah, that is a clear understanding of what has been done so far and what will be done, let's say, in the upcoming months. But we are in luck today to have Anna with us, who is one of the case study coordinators. So she can really drive us through the process on the ground to understand what has been done, but also what were the challenges, what are the learning points. So please, Anna, the floor is yours. Drive us through the process.
Thank you, Davide. Yes, it was indeed quite a drive. It has been 1.5 years that we've been in contact with stakeholders on the ground. For myself, in my case, in Slovenia, we had a group of mainly young farmers, of course, because we are CIJAS, so that's our main contact on the floor, but also the Chamber of Agriculture. We had the ministry intervening at some points in the process as well. Cooperatives, even if I must say here, we talked about cooperatives earlier. In Slovenia, that was one of the challenging things because cooperatives, there is this stigma in this area of Europe because of the historical perception of cooperatives. So when we say cooperatives are there to actually support farmers working together and have a better bargaining power on the market, in the situation of Slovenia, it was also seen more as some structure that would actually not really support you, or there was the idea that they would be kind of telling you how to do things. And it was very hard, especially for older generations of farmers, to make the case for it because it was easier for them to consider the cooperation only within the family circle or very close neighbors. But cooperatives was a bit something we had to work on. When it comes to how the process went with especially the business side of things, I think it tied back also quite some with the policy workshops in our case, because of course with direct selling, I mean, it's a direct link between, that was the topic of the case study. I'm a bit jumping ahead here. But with direct selling, you have this direct connection between the farmer and the consumer. And then you have the situation that, I mean, you would expect them to be setting the price and the consumer is just buying from them. And they should have a very high bargaining power in this process. But we had very surprising discussions on the fact, first, price setting, very difficult thing to do for a farmer, counting all the work that is behind it, counting actually working hours. That was one of the elements that came very much forward in our case study. It's the working time and the working hours in short food value chains. And they're actually cooperations, because we were speaking a lot downstream cooperations in the project, because that was also the orientation of the business work package in general. But because of this very direct connection, and there was not much value chain actors to consider a part of, at the end of the day, the consumer, the cooperation possibilities, we saw them. There were, of course, a few downstreams with, for instance, cooperative shops of farmers, but we saw them also upstream in the idea of how can farmers, in order to maintain this direct selling over time and throughout generations, how can they cooperate to make their workload lower? And one thing that came ahead and was very present in our case study in the end of the day is the necessity of creating cooperation upstream and have this farm relief systems that exist elsewhere in Europe as well. Well, that I think is quite telling. And we had, of course, several workshops to refine that, have different sets of practices, business models that could be put in place, but upstream and downstream in our case study. I hope this answers your question, Davide.
Definitely, yes. It's an interesting case study. Of course, I have a lot of questions, maybe specifically about the case study. First of all, how did you come up with this idea of direct selling? And is it common in Slovenia, for example, to have this kind of business model? So farmers directly selling to the consumers, or it's a rather niche in the country?
Okay, actually, well, I will answer to your second question first. It's rather traditional. It's very rooted in traditional practices that even people from the city are used to go back to maybe the rural areas they grew up in and buying directly from farmers. It's kind of traditional model. Like we had a young farmer explaining us that for 3 generations, in their family farm, they had been doing tours of the region to deliver milk every second day. So it was really rooted, and they had their very old clientele throughout families. It was a process and a practice. So it's there, but very traditional practices, not very digitalized yet. And when it comes to what was your first question again? I'm sorry.
Well, the first question is, how do you come up with the idea on a case study for direct selling? Yeah.
Actually, this was a proposal when we were in the proposal stage of ENFASYS. We had one of our vice presidents, Doris Letina, that is still a young farmer in Slovenia, very engaged in thinking of new business models there on the ground, very engaged in and the whole topic of the project is sustainable farming systems. And when we were considering that, especially on the 3 pillars of sustainability, she was super interested and she really pushed forward for us to do it in Slovenia. So she was there at the start of the project, but then we changed presidency, but she continued to be a big ally on the ground and really helped us streamline the contact with all the case study stakeholders that we had. Because of course, CIJA is based in Brussels, so that was the challenge that came with it. I learned to conduct workshops with a simultaneous interpretation, which I think is an anecdote I will keep for my whole professional life, that I can do workshops with people I don't speak the language of. Went very well. Our interpretation team was amazing, but of course we had to mobilize the resources for that. I also had the opportunity to go to Slovenia on the ground on an agricultural fair at the start of the project, and that really helped to build this connection and this trust link, even if it's a long process, it's a lot of workshops, so you really need to keep this link. And at some points, of course, you need to take into account that in certain periods of the year, it's just impossible to have the stakeholders come to your workshops because there is way too much to do in the agricultural sectors. Also, at some point, the ministry changed and they did a full revision of the Agricultural Act, and they also did not show up to our workshops. And then you had the Chamber of Agriculture that had their elections. They did not show up for a few months. So it was really like a juggling exercise to make it work. And eventually, at the end of the day, I'm quite happy of the results that we got. And now at a bit more 9 months before the end of the project, I think that the baby will be delivered well.
Yeah, thank you. I believe also being in the field, I understand these challenges and I think you overcome them very well. I have 2 follow-up questions on what you were saying. The first one, I was thinking, because you said it's quite common in Slovenia to have this business model of direct selling. But what about the other countries? You grew up in Normandy on a farm. So how it is in France, for example, or do you have data or knowledge about maybe the western part of Europe or other parts of Europe? Are they also integrating it? It's less common in your opinion? Or if you even have data, like according to data?
I don't have exact data, but I can tell you, well, in Normandy, we are a very touristic area with a lot of also local products and this like love for food in France. And definitely it's business model that exists. I would not say it's as widely common as the one in Slovenia that really stayed rooted in the habits of people. I mean, around me in France, it was quite common, most common to go to the supermarket to buy your food. But there is this thing of the additional added value, the special thing you do, going on the Sunday on the market, buying from the farmers that actually produce the products, and there is this love for it. But my parents are Dutch, coming from the Netherlands. There, I saw it a bit less common, a bit more like it needs to fit the practical life, and their direct selling, it's not this one-stop shop. Some farmers found a solution, and actually in another project in the north of France, we went to visit this cooperative supermarket of farmers where the products were still owned by the farmers from the moment it leaves the farm to the shopping cart of the consumer. But it was 20 or 30 different direct selling farmers that all came together. And this shop has been running, it's called Au Panier Vert, and it's been running for more than 25 years, very successfully. They even developed additional initiatives with like client customer card. They also have their drive that they developed during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a lot of creativity and creative solutions, and farmers are there once or twice a week because for them it's important to be present. It's still direct selling at the end of the day, but they have also employees helping to valorize the productions. So with processing together. And I think this is the ultimate example of cooperatives, but it was also necessary in that region because there were so many direct selling farmers that at the end of the day, I mean, there was no way to compete, or you were just competing against each other. So they needed to find a new way back in the day, because it's the north of France around Lille. It's a very vibrant region, a lot of farmers that were engaged in this. So yeah, it was the way to come out of the crowd of direct selling farmers and propose something new. Also better, easier for the consumer at the end of the day.
Thank you. Another interesting point that you mentioned before is the difficulty in setting up the right price. And especially you would think that in a direct selling, the criteria you would have less criteria to set the price because there is no an intermediary, it's just the farmer selling to the consumer. But you were also mentioning something very interesting that we often don't think about farming, and it's the hours of work that the farmer is putting into deliver the produce, or the welfare itself of the farmer. And what did you learn new about this? Because for me, this is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I was also expecting, at some point, if your costs are too high, you just have to raise your price. Maybe steadily, not from one day to the other, you multiply by 2. But actually, we have, in this case study, lived through an energy inflation crisis and many inflations across Europe. And we had one of the young farmers in one of the business workshops, Janne, that told us, I had my apples at 2. We had to raise to a few cents, and I had complaints of my customers. But also, from what he said, it was not a clear, super detailed cost calculation in the background. Why that? I was this is something you calculate. If you were a big supermarket, you would calculate those costs. But as a farmer, indeed, it's very difficult, really, especially when you're self-employed, to count the work properly. And what farmers were telling me is also that we don't even want to go through this process because we know it will just depress us, because we know that our costs, unfortunately, are usually way higher than what we can pretend to sell on the market. And in the situation of it being the traditional practice, you would expect them to be able to get a premium. And when there is marketing, there can be a premium. But because it's the traditional practice, people actually go to direct selling because there is not all those margins. And actually, it can be cheaper than the supermarket. So that was also, and of course, you don't want to lose your customers that have been there for generations in their families. And so it's a leap to take. And in the end, he had to raise it. People were not very happy, but eventually they stayed. But he was a bit tortured by it himself.
Yeah, I think you touched on a very important point, that it's indeed in different areas of Europe. If direct selling is seen as a traditional method of selling, then it is also maybe the cheaper, because you go there to avoid all the intermediaries and the profit that the intermediaries would take, even though thinking probably that you're doing a benefit to the farmer. On the other hand, on other regions of Europe where direct selling is rather coming back rather than being a tradition, maybe their prices may be higher than in the large distribution because it is seen as a more fair approach towards farming. Would you agree with me on this, or?
I think I would agree with you. I mean, at least from the practice I had, like in where I grew up and the practice I saw in Slovenia, like where I grew up in Normandy, it was seen as the special thing you would do. And indeed, like it was all very high premium products. It was all made like by hand and everything. And you would be like, this is something like you would offer a local products basket for Christmas, for instance. But for Slovenia, it was more part of the convenience of the day, but maybe not for everyone, of course. I don't want to make generalities, but the people I talked to in this case study, definitely that's what came through in the workshops.
Okay, thank you, Anna. I have one more question for you, but stepping out of the case study and taking the opportunity of the fact that you are in CEJA, that is an organization at European scale working with young farmers. We have seen a lot of young farmers demonstrating between 2023 and 2024, and we have really understood how much it is important income security in farming, like in any other sector, and it is a key priority for young farmers. And how do these new innovative business models support such income security? And basically, how do they strengthen the long-term economic, but also social and environmental sustainability of the sector? What would you say?
It's a very complex question you're asking here, Davide, which I will try to give you some elements of answer. First, one essential thing, especially when you talk about young farmer, for them, when they are going into their career, the business model they are taking on, they expect it to work for them for the next 30, 35 years. I mean, you can change, of course, in your career, but this is one of the essential things for the stability of your organization. And we know that the biggest challenge, especially in the first 5 years of setting up, it's like survival. And your income needs to be met. So those there is more niche business models. I mean, direct selling, I would still consider it's not the most widely adopted business model. But if you have your customers base, if you have this structure that is there, definitely you can have higher incomes, even if you have the situation of Yarnay, that was a bit difficult for him to raise things. Eventually, at the end of the day, it worked for him. It worked better than being tied to a contract with a very long chain where the bargaining power is way lower and he could not just change the price. Even if it's here was hard, it was still possible. And the rest of the question, so yes, it was one of the key topics of the demonstrations indeed, because in this period, I mean, it was also before the European elections, but it was also just the aftermath of the war in Ukraine. We had also seen the COVID crisis, and we have seen big inflation everywhere in Europe. And farmers, they felt very much squeezed between high input prices that went higher and higher, and the downstream part that was not ready yet to take on this cost. So it was like trying to make it work. Despite this, there was big demands that were on the table, and actually some legislative files that I'm working on myself and one of my colleagues as well, on having mandatory contracts to not be to not be at the end the culprit of the game, but also fighting more against unfair trading practices. We have seen discussions, for instance, in Austria, the Ministry of Agriculture or the Minister of Economy, I'm not sure or maybe both actually, speaking like wanting to have a law against shrinkflation, because at the end of the day, the weak links in the value chains, they are the farmers and the consumers, and what's happening in between, it's very opaque, and there can be unfair trading practices because everyone wants their margin at the end of the game. But it's true that when there is a bit less actors in the middle, it's easier for them to maybe make more profit. For the farmer, you're mostly a price taker, which is very frustrating. Coming back to those new business models, there is a lot of possibility and potential there. Also, we have to see like cooperatives. It's quite an old model when you think about it. It's not niche, but also trying to keep on the cooperativism spirit in those cooperatives, because there is this drive to just be a business as usual, while cooperativism spirit is based on internal democracy. And at the end of the day, a cooperative is a bit a non-profit business, or at least for the cooperative itself, it's there to actually support the farmer and give them this common income. But those structures, they are very old, they are very big, and it's hard for young farmers to necessarily have a voice in them. Also, we have not seen much setup of new cooperatives at larger scale, but maybe it's also because it doesn't work. But I think that there is definitely, we are working on this topic with Asija, with Kojeka, that is wanting to have cooperatives that serve the generational renewal as well. Many topics to discuss there. I'm kind of losing myself in all the explanations, but yeah, I think definitely those business models can bring something new to the table if they are reinvented, some of them. And definitely income, it's at the core of everything at the end of the day. If you want sustainable farming systems, if the income aspect is not ensured, it's not sustainable.
Yes, definitely. I mean, when we talk about sustainability, it's indeed not only environmental sustainability, but there needs to be also the economic part, the social part. And thank you very much for such an excellent answer to a probably complex question. Thank you, Anna. Before concluding today's episode, we said that there are 10 case studies in ENFASYS and different business models arising from these case studies. And we also said that the work is still ongoing. Some of the results are not there yet. But Joanna, how will these results also be used by other areas of work of the project?
Yes, I will explain this shortly. First of all, thank you, Anna, for your detailed explanation about the work you've done within your case studies. And actually, it was one of the most interesting cases that we studied. So thank you for your results and for your insight in each step of the procedure. So like Anna, there are many case studies that actually provide the insights into many aspects that we ask for them. So we conclude to develop a kind of business models types and new business model types. And now in ENFASYS perspective, in project perspective, this actually insight will be actually feed directly to the design of new evidence-based business strategies and some social innovation. We also combine all these results with results from other work within this project, meaning behavioral insights, also policy analysis, and that will help the project for overall project to ensure that the provided recommendations are actually reflect the needs of farmers in both systemic level but also in case study level. So in regards of project, this is the ongoing work and how all these results will be used. But actually, I think we're really enthusiastic and we would like to further exploit all the results. So we're thinking of disseminate all these new models within policymakers, cooperatives, through, of course, dedicated and specific communication activities. And this, I think, and we believe that will show exactly not only which policies are helping farmers, but also which of the business strategies are actually working on the ground. So, overall, I think by identifying these models that are actually sustainable in economical way, but also environmental beneficial, will support and the project will contribute to, let's say, a future farming system that would be more resilient, more fair, and more attractive, of course, for farmers and for the new generation of farmers as well.
Thank you so much. We will conclude with this positive statement. Yeah. Thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Anna, for participating in today's episode. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.